Hello, PhotoPills. Rafael Debar here. Welcome to another masterclass. Today, we're going to travel to Namibia with our friend Karel.
Hello,
Karel,
everybody. How are
welcome to the
you?
show.
Thank you very much.
I'm fantastic because Namibia is one of the I think it's one of my must be my it's one of my favorite places on earth. And you're the perfect person because you're based in South Africa and you've been to Namibia 1,000 times. So looking
Yeah,
forward to
well,
learn about the country and everything Namibia wise related.
no, definitely. I mean, I basically grew up going there at least once or twice a year. I worked there as a safari field guide for about 3 years. And honestly, I really do believe that Namibia ticks all of the boxes for photography, whether it's Astro, whether it's cultural, wildlife, landscapes, you name it. You've got everything in Namibia.
It's photography, adventure in a wonderful country.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. I mean, Namibia's got a lot of hidden gems. It's a very big country, so you do spend a considerable amount of time driving. Because there's so much to see, PhotoPills, we've actually got three different workshops there that we focus on multiple different places because you can't possibly do the whole country in one go. But yeah, today we'll be focusing on the Diamond Coast, which I can't say any of the workshops aren't my favorite, but if I had to pick one, I would lean towards the Diamond Coast.
And why?
Well, we've got a whole presentation prepared discussing exactly that. So as soon as we're finished here, I'm going to jump into the presentation. And the whole idea now is to not only share images that you can expect of taking, but really to share the experiences you can expect, the memories made. The areas that we go to are really not places that people can go to on their own. But again, instead of elaborating now, I'll go through the trip, sort of location by location.
Yeah,
Great.
let's jump into it. And as always, guys, we have Jessica Rojas in the chat. She will be supporting us in the chat, asking questions, answering questions, and sending your questions to us. So, you have any question for Karel, for myself, about Namibia, about life, about photo pills, please do leave the question in the chat because we're ready to help. And Karel, you ready? I am ready
Awesome.
for
Yeah,
action.
I'm good to go. All right, folks. So my full name is Carel-Louis Steenkamp, but I typically go by Carel. I am a wildlife photographer from South Africa, and as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I was a safari field guide in Namibia for a couple of years. That is also where I picked up my passion for photography, and because of the field guiding, you can expect, or it's obvious that it was with wildlife. My passion, especially with photo pools, is connecting with like-minded individuals. And going on these expeditions, yes, it's very important to me that you end up going home with images that you love. But I like to think that my job is making sure that everybody also has a fantastic time. Because at the end of the day, you don't travel around the world to not have a good time and not to remember some of the great experiences that you had while taking some of the best photos that you're going to take. I like to think in your life. My motives, wildlife, out and out. I'm a sucker for Astro. I love wildscapes, and then silhouettes of wildlife is also another big one for me. Equipment, I shoot with Canon. I do also use DJI. I've got a thorough understanding of Nikon and Sony. Again, I can help or assist with most brands, but Canon is my preferred weapon of choice. And then my website at the bottom for anybody interested. All right, folks. Today we'll be discussing the Diamond Coast. Some highlights of this trip include quiver trees, canyons, abandoned towns, shipwrecks, and then the two biggest ones are dunes and, of course, the beautiful night sky of Namibia. My personal highlight is the 5 full days that we are completely off the grid on the Diamond Coast, where in 5 whole days, the only signs of human life outside of our group was a plane on the last day at the location where this image was taken. Other than that, you spend, as I mentioned, 5 days seeing places, traversing a landscape where less than 0.0001% of people, let alone photographers, will ever see in their life.
That's fantastic because you cross the desert, right? Completely from south to north.
Exactly. So we make our way from Luderitz up all the way back to Walvis Bay. Later in this presentation, I do show, but yeah, 5 days of purely going across the desert where there are no roads, no electricity, no water, which is, it sounds sort of invigorating, but it's super fun, very adventurous, and yeah, stay tuned to see what we experience there. So, first stop after Windhoek, we head south to a town called Keetmanshoop, and there we spend 2 nights at a location we call the Quiver Tree Forest. This place is absolutely amazing, and our focus here is on golden hour, blue hour, and then a lot of Astro. It is very important for me to not only give the clients or the photo pillars good opportunities for nice photos. My goal is to make you a better photographer, and whether that's understanding your gear better or whether that's developing an eye for composition, we tackle every single thing on these expeditions. What I love about the Quiver Tree Forest is it allows us a very good opportunity to help you train your eye for better composition. So we don't just simply go to specific trees and put down our tripods and tell you to use these settings and then take the picture at this time. We really walk around, we scout together, we discuss angles, we discuss where the light is going to come from, we discuss where the Milky Way is going to be relative to the subjects, which in this case is going to be the quiver trees. Gear used for these locations, wide angle lenses, I use the Canon's 15 to 35 2.8, and then also some mid-range, a 24 to 105 would tick this box. I'm going to show you some images of where we also plan the direction of light for blue hour specifically, and then of course planning the Milky Way in relation to the subject.
How does it feel, Carol, to be in this location? Because it seems that it's very rocky, and then you have these, 1,000 trees there, right?
It is, especially if you've already been to Namibia, you've heard of the specific species quiver tree. And depending on where you go, it's usually a rare sight where you might find one every couple of kilometers. So going to the Quiver Tree Forest firstly is very overwhelming because you have hundreds of different trees to compose with. And then the terrain, very rocky, a little bit of hills or some hills. And then, yeah, not a lot of light pollution. It is Namibia, so you don't have to worry about cities or towns or cars or whatnot. And yeah, again, the night sky is absolutely fantastic. I'll be showing some Astro shots throughout the trip, which I hope will entice you enough to come to this beautiful country on its own.
Yeah, I haven't been to that far south. I've done the big loop, and I did in September with you the Skeleton Coast north to Angola, and then
also
back.
Fantastic.
But yeah, this is in my bucket list for sure. Maybe next year, if Marco allows me.
That'll be fun. Yeah.
Perfect.
So an example on the left, we do go in depth with the PhotoPills app, of course. It assists us with planning light, with planning composition. The planner on the left is very nice to use when you're not physically at the location itself. There, the red pin or the orange pin is on the Quiver Tree Forest. And all I did there was try to get a general feel of where the sun set and the light was going to come from for taking shots of, I liked abstracts of the quiver trees where I'm trying to photograph the earth shadow. So basically where the night sky or the sky goes from blue to purple. And these shots, I really like getting some side light of that warm setting sun, but of course after the sun has set. So the sun you can see has set in a northwesterly direction, meaning if I want some side light, I can either point south or north or directly east. You don't want to be pointing west for the Earth shadow because you're not going to get those vivid lines that I'm going to show you in the next slide. A great tip that I always tell people on the workshops is about the PhotoPills widget, which you can see on the screenshot on the right. The widget, I honestly think I use on a daily basis and not even always for photography related reasons. It's a very concise and summarized little piece of information that you can put anywhere on your cell phone that'll very quickly display the time that the sun is going to rise and set, as well as the moon. And what I love about it is seeing what times the golden hour and the blue hour will be, as well as when it is completely dark, basically when you can start taking images of the Milky Way. So, of course, I mentioned the abstract image with the Earth shadow in the background. So I already knew in my mind that when I went scouting, I wanted to get a tree with a clear horizon in the background. This is another thing that I really like to teach people while doing photography, is incorporating the background into your images. If I can quickly show you the shot, here's an example. I was pointing north. You can see that the warm light is coming from a western direction where the sun had already set, and you're getting the beautiful colors from the blue transitioning into the purple. And these types of shots are fantastic. It's very fun for me, not only to photograph, but to edit, because they're very minimalistic, and I really like to have clean images. Sometimes. From the Quiver Tree Forest, we then head to our new or next destination, Fish River Canyon. This in itself is an experience of a lifetime. It is the largest canyon in Africa, and according to some sources, the second largest canyon in the world. Now, this really, in my opinion, is a sunset location because the sun, when it rises, does struggle to reach the canyon with golden light. But as you can see in the panel on the screen, for sunset, you do, from certain viewpoints, get beautiful views of where the sun is sort of falling on the textures of the canyon. Yeah, it's also very nice or for me, I take photos of the group sometimes because after we take the shots of the canyon, the silence there is deafening. Obviously, I've got no real size comparisons that you can see how big it is there, but it's stunning and absolutely. If you go to Namibia, you have to see Fish River Canyon. We also do some Astro there.
Yeah, Carol, how far away is the Fish River to from the
Quiver Tree? It's also
forest?
quite a distance away. So
Yeah.
on this trip, most drives are going to be between 2 to maybe even 5 hours, 6 hours long. So we do travel with two very, very comfortable overlanders or kitted out land cruisers. We split the group into two, obviously air-conditioned vehicles, and we've got trailers, so baggage and space is never going to be an issue. But do expect a lot of driving because, as I mentioned before, Namibia does have a lot of hidden gems, but they are hidden away from each other, quite considerably far from each other. So, yeah, again, from the Quiver Tree Forest to Fish River Canyon.
Nice.
If I recall correctly, it's about a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Another example, because at Fish River Canyon, you are a little bit limited with your locations because there are only 3 different viewpoints you can photograph from. On this screen, we try to plan an image of a Milky Way arch from the Fish River Canyon or one of the viewpoints. And as you can see, the only place that we could get a view with the Milky Way and the canyon in one shot, where it wasn't too late in the morning because you also can't really get into the national park too early. You can see on the bottom of the screenshot there, it was at 5:45 in the morning or 5:45. And then the Milky Way was already very close to the arch. So fortunately, we use the Quiver Tree Forest to really. I know a lot of the PhotoPillers that come on these trips already know how to photograph Astro, but we always do still go sort of a comprehensive overview of how to do Astro, especially in a group format. So, again, highlighting the fact that regardless of your experience level, whether you've never done Astro or whether you're a seasoned astrophotographer, these expeditions are perfectly suited to all sorts of photographers. Um, and what's nice about focusing on that at the Quiver Tree Forest is that allows us to, at a place like this at Fish River Canyon, where we don't necessarily have too much time to set up. Everybody's already comfortable with their gear, with setting up their gear, and with using the proper settings so that we can have the whole group set up and ready to photograph within less than, I want to say, 10 minutes. So again, this is planning. We did the planning with the group from the accommodation that we were staying at, and we went there the next day to capture or to photograph this image. So again, a single row of exposures. It's not a blue hour blend then with the Milky Way. You can actually see on the far right side of the image that it was starting to get light pretty quickly. But yes, I do believe with a certain amount of confidence that PhotoPills is most likely the first group of photographers that have ever mentioned, or not mentioned, but gathered to take this photo at Fish River Canyon because of the timing and the accessibility to the viewpoints at that time.
Man, it's really incredible. The Milky Way in the southern hemisphere, especially in Namibia, is just
It's
see the
addictive.
whole. It's like the galaxy
It's really addictive.
looks.
I've had a couple of people come on these workshops where they actually say that once they come here and experience these clean and clear and dark night skies, that it becomes a little bit difficult, to go back home and then do Astro again because they just see that, wow, these Namibia night skies, they make it a little bit easy, if I can put it like that. And I don't blame them. I'm going to show you a couple of other shots during this expedition where I don't think you'll believe that it's a single exposure. You can see on the top left, we've got some shooting stars. On the top right as well, another shooting star. So absolutely astonishing place. And again, just the surreal and serene experience of being at that vast canyon in the dark is a very nice experience in itself.
shooting a vast canyon like this one is a challenge itself in composition. No, it's what other challenges do you face when you go and try to photograph the, the canyon?
That's a good question. Fortunately for this specific shot, the Milky Way was the limiting factor. So we obviously had to shoot in a western direction, and then we just had to basically find a location where we can be close to the edge without compromising safety, of course, that we do have a view of a nice section of the canyon. Where for sunset, for example, you need to make sure that you've got a spot that the light is going to fall on from the western direction where the sun is setting. So you can't face west, of course you can't face east because we can't get to the other side of the canyon. So we wanted to either look north or we wanted to look south, and in this case the best viewpoint is north looking south on the canyon.
Okay.
All right, from Fish River Canyon, our next stop is Luderitz, okay,
Wow.
the ghost town of Kolmanskop. This is a place that changed my preferences for photography quite a bit because I never used to be a person to photograph buildings or architectural structures or anything of that matter. But going to Luderitz, we've got about 3 shooting sessions there. It really did change my opinion, not only for photography, but also for sort of admiring the history of these towns. Now, Luderitz, it used to be a town that was built because of diamond mining. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not too sure, but apparently the diamonds ran out sometime, I think, early 1900s, and then the people just simply abandoned it. So some of the rooms still have, coffee mugs. Some of the rooms still have artifacts of when the people were living there. But to see the town slowly get consumed by the desert is, again, a very serene or surreal experience in itself. Now, what I did learn at Luderitz is, firstly, it's a place that you can photograph throughout the day, because as the direction of the light changes, the compositions also do change. Now, again, this is a great place to assist me, to assist you on developing a compositional eye, because not only are you using structures and lines inside of buildings, but you need to take into account the direction of the light. Again, another useful tool for PhotoPills, or something that PhotoPills helps you plan. This spot is perfect for mornings. Typically in the mornings with the sun rising in the east, you do get a lot of the light falling into the buildings, where in the evening it does not allow you for golden light because of the massive dunes that are just on the edge of the building. So again, these are some of the images taken during the day. If I could show you my whole portfolio of the images I got through this trip, we would never end this meeting or this presentation, but I've got to skim through the most important parts. Very close to Luderitz is a fantastic building called Grasplatz. I assume in English it would be Grasplatz. It's a German name. And here's another great example of how we used PhotoPills to plan for a specific image. So on the left, we plan for basically while we're at the accommodation, just trying to see generally whether the shot will be able to work. You can see where the building is. You can see at what time, just after 9 o'clock, where the Milky Way will be relative to the building if we were standing at the orange pin location. And when we went to scout the location, you can then use the AR function, which is fantastic. We always use that when we are out at the location itself. And there you can see that at 20 minutes to 8, if I stand exactly where I was standing with my cell phone taking that picture, that would be the position of the Milky Way relative to the building during that time. A lot of people wonder what the orange dot is in the Milky Way. No, it is not the sun. It is the galactic core, and this is typically the brightest spot of the Milky Way, and therefore also very nice to incorporate into your compositions for any astrophotography. This is the planning versus the final shot. So this was, of course, with the group. We spent quite some time figuring out the lighting inside of the house, but of course the Milky Way in Namibia, photographing straight into a dark night sky with almost zero light pollution, that is again a single exposure. So I always like to enjoy the challenge of trying to take a single exposure. I do also go through taking a blue hours or a shot for the foreground and a separate shot for the background, maybe even taking multiple images of the background to do a noise stacked version. We do discuss all of these things on the expeditions, but I also like to emphasize on taking a single exposure, because I've noticed a lot of people, especially if they're new to editing, find it very overwhelming to go back home after the workshop and process a lot of these images, simply because of the fact that they think it's going to be so much effort. It's basically, it's become a task now to process the images. And 9 out of 10 times, if it's cumbersome or if it's a burden to actually go to the computer to start editing the pictures, you're not going to end up editing any of the photos that you spent a lot of time and effort to fly and travel across the world to take. Where a lot of the techniques I go through allows you to take one single perfect shot, and I also teach you how to edit it in a very efficient and short way so that you get most of your results in a very short and fun time, which I like to think encourages the people to edit or process the images after they go back.
Very nice, very nice.
Okay.
All these buildings have German origin, right? Because Namibia was
Yes.
a German colony, right?
Exactly. In Namibia, we also call, or some people refer to Namibia as Little Germany, exactly because of what you mentioned. So a lot of the towns in Namibia have got German names. You'll see the architecture or the buildings also have a lot of German. I don't know the English terms for this, but you can see it's a German town, and yeah, Luderitz is definitely one of them.
And you have locals that are white with blue eyes and blonde. It's like it's incredible. First
Well,
time I visited Namibia was like, wow, these Namibians are kind of German.
no, very much so.
Some of them,
Very
some of
much
them.
so. Some of them. Okay, continuing. Now, the best part, my personal highlight of the whole trip, is the actual Diamond Coast expedition. So, on our last morning at Luderitz, we meet the team that will be taking us through the Diamond Coast. This is a team of people that do this for a living. They are really great at what they do, whether it comes to driving, whether it comes to setting up tent, when it comes to making food in the middle of nowhere. They know exactly what to do. So, first off, I want to start this by saying that yes, it is 5 full days of camping in the middle of nowhere, but don't worry, you do not have to lift a finger if you do not want to. The professional team that we work with do everything for us. Again, as mentioned a couple of minutes ago, from setting up tent to setting up the kitchen to setting up the bathrooms to making Michelin star quality food in the middle of nowhere, it's a surreal experience. Here's a quick photo I took with my cell phone on our first day. This is just as we got off the road, um, heading into the unknown, or at least for us, the unknown. On this trip, a couple of kilometers after this photo was taken, there is no road. The wind basically blows over whatever the previous tour operators that went through a week or two before made, so it's as if you are driving through untouched land. It's honestly, as I mentioned before, a surreal expedition and experience in itself. The next slide is basically what to expect day to day. On the left is a campfire. That is how our evenings are typically spent before we go out for our Astro session, sitting around the campfire with like minded people, sharing stories, having fun, planning whatever we want to plan with PhotoPills, and as I mentioned earlier, having a good time. The picture on the right is what you can expect will happen on this trip. We do go up and down some massive dunes very frequently. Please do not, I don't want to say you shouldn't be scared of this. The people that do this are professionals, they do this for a living. And also, if you do think you are going to potentially be scared of this, from day one, closest to Luderitz, the dunes are the smallest. And as you get closer to Walvis Bay, which is the town where we end the expedition with, the dunes get larger and larger and larger. And this is nice because it allows you to gradually get used to the dunes getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which I do think is a nice thing because, yeah, looking at that photo, it's already steep, it's already quite far, and being in that vehicle is two completely different feelings. Again, just emphasizing the adventure of the trip. There's a lot of traversing the large dunes. Whether you're trying to get from, the camp or whether you're trying to get to a shooting location, we do travel those dunes a lot. And to a lot of people coming on these trips, the dunes will be specifically what they are after on this workshop. Again, I'm not too familiar with any locations abroad or internationally, but a lot of the photo pillars that have come here can't stop speaking about the fact that these dunes are bigger, and they continue as far as the eye can see, for days. It's not one day for 30 minutes where we go through the dune. It's literally probably 3 full days where there is just nothing but dunes around you.
And how long do you travel per day? How many
Per
kilometers
day,
do you think?
that is a great question. So, what I love about the Diamond Coast expedition, and this is going to sound controversial because with PhotoPills, everything is usually planned to the minute. But most important thing with this expedition is there are no plans. Expect the unexpected. And that is the beauty of it. Is obviously the people that drive us around, they know exactly where they're headed and more or less where they need to sleep for the night. But generally, we can't tell you that we're going to be at a massive dune that faces due west so that we can get the sun on top of the dune. We can't do that. But we can assure you that because of where we're going, there's going to be endless compositions of beautiful images that you can take in any direction. Looking at the image now on the left, those are cob, I believe. On the last day, they actually catch the fish out of the ocean. Less than an hour after that image was taken, we had the fish battered and deep fried.
Incredible.
And I'm not exaggerating if I tell you that was probably the best fish I've had in my entire life, simply because of how fresh it was. The second day, we try to catch crayfish, also from the coast. So a lot of the food is very fresh, sustainably caught from the environment, very well prepared. The food is a massive highlight of this expedition. And then the rest of the mornings, because unfortunately we can't drive around in the mornings when it's still dark, because we are not allowed to drive around when it's dark, purely for safety reasons. But you can see we take the group and we explore around the camp, because you don't need to drive far to get to a beautiful location you're sleeping in. A great location already. So we typically just walk up a dune until we're satisfied, and then we photograph in any direction we like to. And honestly, the fun thing about composition in the dunes is you typically just look wherever the light catches your eyes. And then again, we focus on explaining the settings, explaining some compositional tips in the field. Laura and I were together last year. It was super fun. Carl and I will be together next year. I'm very excited. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and could you share a few tips on how you can compose and manage light direction? What do you usually are looking for when you're shooting the dunes?
That's a
More
great
abstract or
question.
more white or?
I'll get to that, I think, after these images.
Yeah, good.
Another big highlight is for people that do enjoy taking images of beautiful vehicles. This trip will be filled with opportunities, because as we traverse throughout the day, sorry, you did ask me this earlier, I didn't answer your question fully. But in terms of schedules or timelines or whatever, this is non-existent on this expedition. There is no such thing as, okay, we're going to depart tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock and we're going to arrive at our camp at 4 o'clock in this afternoon. There are general estimates. We try and leave as early as possible. Typically, the setup will be we wake up at, well before sunrise. Us as a group, we will go and photograph. When we come back after golden hour, breakfast will either be ready or will almost be ready. While we're eating breakfast, the the campsite will get set up. And only after the campsite is set up, then us as a whole group or convoy of vehicles depart for the day. And then we start driving the dunes. We've got a leader in front. He sort of manages which roads we're going to take, and then all the cars at the back, they all follow the same lines so that you've got the smallest chance of getting stuck. You do still get stuck sometimes, but that's fun on its own to get out of that. And same story with the afternoons. Once you do get to a general area, if we think, all right, this location is beautiful, we do have some say, or there's a lot of leniency in where you want to set up camp. And then you simply set up camp. Then for golden hour, you drive to the highest dune you can see. You park on top of the dune, and then you've got a 360 view all around you of dunes with golden light everywhere. And then let's say 20 to 30 minutes after golden hour, we all get back into the cars, and then we drive the same road back to camp, where of course dinner will almost be ready for us. Camp will already be set up, and then we plan our astrophotography. Oh, okay. So, for instance, here we've got the vehicles where basically every night, if we don't think as a group that there is a nice composition in the area, because sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to get a nice astro shot of the dunes, we plan with PhotoPills quickly where the Milky Way is relative to the vehicle, and then, of course, the image on the right you can see is the final result versus the image on the left is the quick planning with the PhotoPills AR. We also spend a lot of time trying different astro techniques. So, like this one, Star Trail, this is a multiple exposure of the stars, and then of course we had to light paint the vehicle in the foreground, and then we just simply blended them in Photoshop afterwards. But we do also try a different technique that I like to call a silky way, which was coined, or the term was coined by another photo pillar called Penny. Thank you, Penny. And it's exactly the same end result, but you have zero editing time required. But again, I'll focus on that in a couple of minutes. Now we get to the dunes that you asked a couple of minutes ago. So again, when you get there and you see how the light falls on the dunes, this is going to be your primary compositional drive, I would say, is the light. Of course, the shapes of the dunes, whichever is visually aesthetic, whichever typically is the closest, will matter. In this image, the direction that the wind was blowing, I also try to use. Typically, my compositional tips stay the same with most of the genres of photography I do. I love either side lit or backlit images. Now, a lot of people don't use backlit images as often as they should, and I think it's because of a fear of overexposing the shot. With dunes, you don't need to do this, and I'll even throw in tips if you join the expedition for wildlife, because shooting into the light really allows you to sort of clean up the background to make the subject stand out more. But anyways, enough babbling. On this specific image, I simply used a general rule of thirds. You can see that the subject or the main dune is on the right third, the dune right in front of us with the wind is generally in the bottom third, and the sight or the sun, the light is coming from the left. Another example, this is a little bit earlier. We were still driving and again shooting straight into the sun. This creates those beautiful rimlet minimalistic shots that I go crazy for. I love this because the textures of this image, when you zoom in closely, so detailed, so sharp, and it really emphasizes those beautiful lines of the dunes, which in itself makes it appear very three-dimensional. Versus if you shoot with the light, you will often find, especially with dunes, it looks very flat. And of course, a big compositional task, I want to phrase it as, that photographers face is creating depth inside of an image. And that's why I love to shoot either side lit or backlit. And with dunes, especially the case. So, yeah, of course, I think it was actually the same evening as this picture. Might have been on the way to this dune, because here we're on top of the dune. I think here we're at the bottom of the dunes, and then we stopped, took some backlit shots. Here is an example of another backlit shot, but in the middle of the day, basically. So the sun was still very high, but still, I think, to the north. So I'm pointing in a northerly direction now. And this was while we were driving. If you do see anything that you love or that stands out to you, we're always more than welcome to ask the convoy to stop and to take pictures. But after some time, you also sort of get used to taking pictures while driving. Remember, when it's so bright, you can very comfortably push up your shutter speed to 4,000 or even 8,000th of a second because the sand is very bright, the sun is very bright. So in terms of having the images blurry, you don't have to worry about that. I am always on these trips when we don't know what to expect. I always try and let the environment where we camp sort of dictate what I'm going to photograph or what I'm going to attempt to photograph. These two images are good examples of what I just mentioned because this campsite was the only campsite we had where we had this fascinating geology, and erosion. I don't know if you can see on the screen, but all the holes inside of those rocks really sparked my interest. And I was trying to figure out a nice way of capturing them and the environment. Now, with these, when you are as close to the foreground or to the subject as I was in both of these images, you're going to have to make use of a technique called focus stacking. Again, something that is not difficult, and we do go very in depth about it. So, if you don't know how to focus stack, don't worry, we teach you all of those things. And then, especially on the right, but you can also see it on the left, I love incorporating a starburst into my composition wherever possible. So, compositionally, on the left, I had the little cave again on the top left third, and sort of the sand guiding the eye towards the sun, which I also made a little starburst again, well, not again, but by closing down the aperture and using focus stacking, simply going to Photoshop and putting all your shots together. And then on the right, again, I love how I was able to capture the finer details in those rocks, which I'm not a geologist. I don't know what types of rocks they are, but what the guides there explained to us is this is a rock that consisted of two different rocks, obviously a very hard one and a very soft one, and over thousands of years, with wind erosion, it has sort of caved away the softer rock and left behind the harder rock behind, which has revealed those beautiful, beautiful patterns. This location, okay, so this morning, Laura and I and some of the clients woke up to photograph this. This is what I referred to earlier as the Silky Way. This is a single exposure, typically between 15 to 25 minutes, depending on how long you want the lines to be. And I think we woke up around 4 o'clock or 4:30. And there's a very nice story that I like with these, or this specific location. While we were busy taking the shot, and that's what I really like about these long exposures, is once you set the camera up and you start taking the photo, if the camera is busy doing its job, you get to really enjoy the environment that you're in. You get to sit down, lie on your back if you want to, observe the stars, speak with your like-minded PhotoPillers, because everybody there is complete, photo fanatics who always like to geek out about everything photography. But this specific morning, okay, and this again is what I absolutely love about the unknown about these trips and expecting the unexpected. Now, Laura and I were busy chatting while the cameras were doing the jobs. And after a minute or so, she pointed past my shoulder and said she thinks, there's a person or there's something. And I turn around and remember it's pitch black. It's still very, very dark. The moon is not out, so we can barely see anything. Now I can see the black figure that she's referring to. It's about, I would guess, 15, maybe 20 meters away from us, but it's stationary. It's not moving at all. And we look for probably 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and it doesn't move. So we just think, oh, it's a rock that just looks, or is blacker than the rest. And we continue speaking. Not even 5 minutes later, I turn to my side because I heard something, and I see this black figure is now suddenly 5 meters next to us. And I did get a little bit of a fright. Now, just to paint the picture a little bit, we were standing on top of a rock, and let's say a meter to our left was a meter drop. And then there's probably a 2 meter section of sand, and then after that 2 meters, there's another rock that, let's say, is also a meter high. Now, on top of that rock was this dark figure. And as I mentioned, I got a fright. And then after a couple of seconds, I realized that, hey, this was a brown hyena. The most rare species of hyena in Africa. And Laura and I sort of held our, we didn't speak. We were looking at the animal, and then it started walking away. I told Laura, because I remembered from my guiding days, I also had an encounter where a hyena approached us while we were, conversing or speaking with each other. And after we started to keep quiet, I think this actually made the brown hyena uncomfortable. So I told her, no, wait, it obviously approached us while speaking. We should just continue speaking. Otherwise, it's going to get suspicious or probably a little bit, scared and walk off. So we continued speaking. The brown hyena stopped, and it continued standing exactly where it was. And after some minutes, Laura and I thought, hey, this hyena is actually standing on top of the rock. And if we can somehow manage to move, let's say 10 to 15 meters back and also to the left, we'll be able to capture the Milky Way and the hyena in a single frame. And after some attempts, and with the hyena moving and then staying put, we eventually got into a position where we were able to take these images. Now, again, because we did single exposures and there were absolutely no light sources, it's not going to be a fantastic looking image, but for me, it's more about the memory. Now, here you can see a shot, a single exposure with the Milky Way and a real wild brown hyena in the foreground. And I mean, this is just a perfect example of why you do these kinds of trips. Is no amount of planning, no amount of guessing could ever land you in these situations. And even though this isn't the most beautiful picture, it's probably going to stay one of my favorites for life because of the story associated with it, because of the experience that we had with the wild brown hyena that was walking around our campsite. By the way, you don't need to be scared of the hyenas. I was joking with our clients. I said brown hyena, they're like the Swiss, they're neutral. They don't instigate, they're not aggressive, and typically if you walk to them, they're not gonna they're just gonna keep their distance. So the brown hyenas are our friends. There's no reason to be scared of them. And again, absolutely magical sighting that we had at this specific campsite.
What an encounter!
Oh,
My
yeah,
God.
no, that was a.
It's also
very
good to
special.
be with you, Carol. That you've been guiding, walking people with lions and really dangerous stuff.
I think most definitely. I do, because of the field guarding. Of course, I have a good understanding of animal behavior, which I do believe will assist, especially with photography. But yeah, like you said, in this specific case, instead of freaking out necessarily or throwing rocks at the animal to try and get it away, we were able to, stay calm and collected and keep the animal calm and collected so that it doesn't run off. And so much so that we were able to move again, set up the cameras, and try and take the shots. Now, this shot I don't know if you can see the hyena, but it's not going to be tack sharp because no animal is ever going to stand still. I do think this exposure was only 3 seconds, maybe 5 seconds. That's why the Milky Way also in itself is not very vivid because we didn't have enough exposure time. Yes, of course, we can remove the night sky with a picture that we took 5 minutes ago with a proper exposure. But to me, this is the single exposure. This is the challenge that we
Nice.
had in the moment. And I do prefer to, as Uncle Tony taught me as well, prefer on the single exposure side. Get the whole shot done once. Doesn't mean we only do this, and there's a lot of scenarios where you have to blend, a lot of scenarios where it's more beneficial to blend. But again, coming back to the story earlier about trying to keep the editing process as simple and straightforward as possible, I am on team single exposure.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Carol, before we move on, there are a few questions.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
don't mind
No.
answering. Andy is asking if it's chilly at night. Is it cold?
Yes, good question. So the trip last year and next year will be in June. Now, June is in the middle of winter in Namibia. So you definitely do want to have thermal gear, thermal leggings, thermal tops. You do want gloves. You do want clothes that you can put on and take off rather easily because during the day it does get warmer. Um, I remember in June, and I don't know if this makes sense or if this helps you in any case. I'm not a person that gets cold easily. I I did get cold frequently on that trip. So I found myself wearing my thermals permanently, whether it was morning or during the day. I always had my thermals on, but then I would take or adjust my outer layers. So typically I'll have a thermal and then a long sleeve shirt and a long sleeve pants and then another big jacket over my sleeve with gloves on. And this was fine for the Astro sessions when it would get the coldest. During the day, I kept my thermals on, but then I would either just keep on my long trousers and go with a short sleeve shirt because then it's easy to take off the big jacket, it's easy to take off the long sleeve. Just be with a normal shirt and the thermal, and yeah, that was my way of going about it. It does get warm with the other expeditions. So, for example, in August with the big loop, it was not as cold at all. And then on the Skeleton Coast with you, Rafa, that was, well, on the Skeleton Coast it was chilly, but the rest of the trip it was not chilly at all. So
In
yes, if I
September,
had to, yeah, if I had to summarize it, do prepare for cold, chilly nights, and then during the day it does get warm, but it doesn't get north of 25 degrees Celsius. So it stays very comfortable, and obviously inside of the vehicles, which we do majority of the driving in, it is air conditioned. So
Yeah.
during the day, we don't really walk around too much. We typically use this time to get from one accommodation or location to another. And then obviously during the Diamond Coast expedition, we drive the whole day long. Nighttime, the tents are very basic tent setups, very comfortable, but it's not glamping. So you do get a stretcher that you sleep on, and then you do also get a what do you call it? A sleeping bag. But apart from that, you just wear the clothes that you want to wear. There are showers available during this trip, so they warm up the water with the fires. Of course, there are bathrooms available. Um, I don't know if I should be saying this, but the
Please
group
do.
and I decided to rather go with the saying that if everybody stinks, nobody stinks. So not a lot of people ended up showering throughout the 5 days, which honestly was not that bad. And again, if you have to shower every morning and every night, there is a shower opportunity available.
Fantastico, fantastico. And how do you deal with charging batteries and phones and laptops and stuff?
Another great question. So during the day, in all of the vehicles, you can charge your gear while driving around, and then at night at the campsite, there's a big charging station with inverters and batteries and stuff where you can just go and plug your gear in to charge. So yeah, not neither on the Skeleton Coast trip or the Diamond Coast trip we had any issues remotely with charging electronics. A very important thing, and I think I do mention this later on, but for the Diamond Coast expedition, I do give you a very thorough briefing the day before in Luderitz. But if you can, try and pack a duffel bag in specifically for the Diamond Coast. So the whole trip, you can bring a standard suitcase. You don't have to worry about that. But please bring a duffel bag that you can specifically take on the Diamond Coast trip, because space with any of these camping trips will always be limited. And the lighter you travel, the more space you have to use for your camera gear. So the camera gear, of course, goes into the vehicles. We don't even need to take all of the camera gear with us. The previous drivers that basically drop us off at Luderitz and meet us at Walvis Bay again, we can send a lot of the stuff that we don't need for the trip with them. And then it basically goes to our accommodation where we will be staying at in Walvis Bay beforehand. So we don't need to travel through the Diamond Coast with everything that we brought. And this is something that I will sort of want to emphasize.
Perfect. Another question from Diane. Is drone allowed? Are drones allowed?
According to our local guides, yes, they were allowed. We did have a PhotoPills with a drone. And yeah, frankly, you know, we're in the middle of nothing and nowhere. You don't see any humans. There are no planes. I don't see a reason why you cannot fly a drone.
Yeah, probably maybe you need a license or something to fly a drone in the national park.
That is something I can look into. I will speak with the guides we had last year, but they did not have an issue.
Yeah. Perfect. Oh, by the way, we have a nice comment from Ladan.
Hi, Ladan. How are you?
Hey, I think you know him.
Yeah, she was on the Diamond Coast trip.
So she's like sending you a nice words like, you know, hi everyone, I was on this trip. All I can say is just do it. No reservation. I think Carol is being modest. So you're being modest, Carol. But yeah.
Oh, thanks, Ladan. You should join again. She was the star of the show.
This trip was so much more than I imagined. All of it takes some sense of adventure with you. So stop being modest.
Ladan, it's funny that I hear your comment now seeing this photo, because what happened between this photo and the next photo was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So the final day, we then head from the previous campsite, of course, to the Shawnee Shipwreck, which is the shipwreck that you see inside of this image. Before the shipwreck, we do pass another shipwreck called the Edward Bolen Shipwreck. Now, we stop for lunch there, and it is a fantastic, a very, very interesting location. I don't recall the dates exactly. I think it was 1904 or 1909 that the Edward Bolen got stranded. But when you get there, it's in the middle of nowhere. The ocean is about, I think, 400 meters away. It's very far away. And there, I think, obviously the guides will be able to the local guides will be able to explain a bit better. But it shows you just how much the coast of the Diamond Coast has grown in the past 100 years or more. 400 meters where that boat got stranded along the coast versus today, where it's very, very far away from the coast. And we go in depth about this on the trip. Apparently, it's got something to do with the Orange River that borders Namibia, and it flushes out the sand, and then the coast brings it back up north and basically builds up the coast. And that was, frankly, really fascinating. We spent lunch there, at the Edward Bolen, and then we continue north, I think for another hour and a half or 2 hours before we get to our campsite, which is basically just across the shipwreck, inside of the dunes, but a walking distance from the shipwreck. Now, the first afternoon, we had a lot of different options compositionally. What ended up being my favorite ones was this blue hour shot, where again the colors of the water and the sky are just so, I don't know, pastel like. You didn't need an ND filter for this because of how dark it was already, or the lack of light available already. And yeah, after the shot, we used PhotoPills to plan when we can attempt Milky Way with this. Here you can see on the image with PhotoPills, you can actually see the boat when it is rendered. Because of the ocean, we are limited by standing on the coast and shooting in a western direction. We can't go to the opposite side of the boat and shoot east, which meant the only time that we could photograph this was, as you can see on the screenshot, at 20 minutes past 4 in the morning. So, 20 minutes past 4, we went there. We all woke up after a very fun last evening party. And fortunately, there was no mist, because mist is always a risk on the coasts. And then the image I display here is another one of those Silky Way techniques where it's a single exposure. I believe this image was about 20 minutes long. And I really love two things. Is firstly, the silky effect of the Milky Way, and secondly, how the star trails are embedded into your raw file. So the image, as you see there, is the raw file basically. All I really do, or all you need to do after you want to process the image, is add color back into the shot, and it takes you not even 2 minutes. I'll show you a very, very simple, very straightforward and efficient technique on how to process that Silky Way. And next up, we go to Walvis Bay, where unfortunately last year we had no luck with the flamingos because there was too much rain in the weeks before the trip started. And I only learned after the workshop last year ended by some of the local guides that I know there that if there's an influx of rain, it dilutes the salt content inside of the lagoon that the flamingos usually stay at. And if the salt levels or concentrations aren't right, the food for the flamingos don't thrive as they usually do, and this forces them to fly more inland to places like Etosha. Anyways, fingers crossed, the flamingos will be there this year, and then we are going to try and take the silhouettes like I took here. It's very fun for me to teach you how to set up the camera for wildlife, to use your understanding of gear, to see where the sun is going to be setting with PhotoPills, to just generally plan on where you're going to be shooting sunset. And then when you go there, you take 1,000 photos because it's wildlife and you always take more images than you think you do. And yeah, eventually you get a gem where, the sun and the flamingos align, like in this shot.
Very nice shot, Carel.
Thank you. After Walvis Bay, the next day we start heading to Sossusvlei.
Carel, before we go to Sossusvlei, we have a question from Diane.
Okay.
Diane is asking, do we have to bring our own tents or sleeping bags?
No, none of that. You just bring your camera gear and rest assured that everything else is done for you. Again, I want to emphasize that you do not, at any stage of this workshop or expedition, have to raise a finger. Everything is planned accordingly, that you do not have to do anything. Of course, you can. If you want to assist with setting up tents or assist making the food, you're more than welcome to do anything you want to do. But you don't have to. The company that we do the expedition part with do everything for us in terms of setting up camping, making food, providing bedding, and all of those things. So again, the only things they do provide is a pillow, a sleeping bag, and a stretcher. That combination was fine for me, but if it's still a bit too cold, just keep your thermals on or sleep with another jacket on, either on your body or over the sleeping bag, and you're good to go.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let me know if you do have any other questions.
I
So
will.
then we head to Sossusvlei, and this is always a completely ethereal, just like Fish River Canyon, an out of this world experience. These dunes, some of the oldest dunes on Earth, by the way, are mind-bogglingly big. Okay, I usually joke the dune will look as if it's a kilometer away. You end up walking 500 meters closer to the dune, and the dune is now 2 kilometers away. Because they are so big, your brain doesn't really comprehend distances that well, like it usually does. So during the evenings, our focus is on the light and the dunes. We go to different spots, we plan some shots, but as the sun sets and as the most beautiful golden light occurs, you just simply, look around you in a eastern direction, and wherever catches your eyes, you use obviously, well, not obviously, but we only use our telephoto lens at Sossusvlei. No mid-range, no wide-angle lenses. For Sossusvlei, it's 500 millimeters and more, because we really need to get close to the dunes here. Even when doing panos, 500 or more. It's not essential. A lot of people come with a 300. It does work, but again, Sossusvlei, you want to think the more the merrier. Do not hold back here. Especially also going back to Walvis Bay, telephoto here again is best. A lot of the shots in the dunes would also be mid-range, but I'm leaning more towards telephoto lens. So sorry, I didn't share that earlier, but a telephoto lens will be vital on this expedition. At Sossusvlei as well, we go to Deadvlei in the morning, and here it's also, again, everything. I keep on saying this word and don't think I'm using it unnecessarily, but ethereal. It is serene. Deadvlei is absolutely, you go there and it's so quiet, and it's a very, or if Bob is watching this, it's only a unique photo. It's not a very unique photo. And yeah, we spend the morning here. We spend 2 afternoons at Sossusvlei like this, breathtaking environments. And again, at this time of the trip, everybody is best friends. We're all joking around. We're all, you know, professional photographers at this stage. Everybody knows their gear. And yeah, after this, we head back to Windhoek for a night, where we do another PhotoPills editing class and lesson. Of course, the whole trip is basically one big PhotoPills lesson. And yeah, and there, wherever we have a chance, we try and really do editing sessions so that we can process the images as we go along. Some essential gear that I would definitely recommend for this trip. Of course, a camera for a photo trip would be important. A wide angle, a mid range, and a telephoto. So my range that I bring for this trip, or the lenses that I bring for this trip for Astro, is a 15 to 35. My mid range is a 24 to 105, and my telephoto is 100 to 500. This basically covers from 15 all the way to 500. Um, if you have other lens questions, I would really encourage you to ask. There's a lot of different combinations you can use. Just don't bring all of your lenses, because you don't need all of your lenses. Again, because space is an issue. A sturdy tripod, a good ball head, and an L bracket. I wanna say this is almost as important as bringing a camera along. You don't want to go to these beautiful locations, and if it's a little bit windy, you end up not being able to take a photo because the tripod isn't a good quality tripod, or If you don't have an L bracket, it's not impossible, but you'll see that an L bracket makes life 100 times easier. Sometimes we try and attempt Milky Way panos, and with the panos, we set up 2 tripods, and then we basically have to swap the cameras around. Otherwise, it'll take 5 hours to finish the pano, and then the Milky Way is way too high. Then we need, preferably, everybody to have an L bracket on. Also for yourself, if you want to quickly change from, horizontal to landscape, it's not ideal to have the ball head move to the side and then move it, because that changes the leveling. And anyways, L bracket is a very, very handy tool to have. A necessity as well as a headlight or torchlight. You don't have to worry about a red light. They don't really pose much benefits. So if you have a white light, it's fine. You don't need anything more. We usually use this just to walk around at night, but as soon as everybody has set up their tripods, then we call the lights out, and then everybody puts their lights off. The duffel bag, as mentioned earlier, for the expedition part of the trip. This is very nice if you want to put less clothes in. Obviously, don't worry about your camera bag. You bring your camera bag as is. But we don't want all the unnecessary luggage to go with on the Diamond Coast part of the trip. And then lastly, coming back to what you asked earlier about, is it chilly? Yes, it is chilly. So please make sure to bring thermal clothing, thick socks. Please bring thick socks. If you don't have thick socks, it's not nice to have cold toes. And warm additional clothes. It's not sub-zero temperatures, but it can get quite close to it. So yeah, just remember to dress for the occasion.
Nice. What an
Any other
adventure.
question? Yeah, no, complete adventure. And then lastly, folks, I really do hope to see you there soon. If I didn't answer any of the questions that you might have had during this talk, please feel free to ask me or Rafa or anybody that you want to at PhotoPills. We're always more than happy to help. The goal is to have you join us on these workshops because, like Ledan mentioned earlier, it is really exciting. It's a very nice adventure. And I can sit here for hours and hours and go through thousands of different awesome photos that I had. But Rafa also told me that I can't sit here for 5 hours and waste everybody's time. So I had to limit myself in that sense.
You did a great job, Carl. So congratulations. It's been amazing. How would you consider the Diamond Coast, which is the south part of the Skeleton Coast, with the Skeleton Coast adventure we did last September, where we went to Angola and back?
That's not a nice question. That's like asking, do I like my mom or my dad more? It's like you can't say really. Both have the magical standouts. The Skeleton Coast expedition part, again, very similar to the Diamond Coast expedition part. I would say the Skeleton Coast is mainly a camping trip, where the Diamond Coast is not a camping trip at all. It's only the 5 days we actually do the Diamond Coast expedition where it is a camping trip. Landscape-wise, the Skeleton Coast is beautiful, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking away from the Skeleton Coast, but I am personally drawn to the Diamond Coast a bit more because of the size of the dunes. The size of the dunes progressively get bigger and bigger and bigger as you go on the Diamond Coast. The Skeleton Coast, you do have 2 days where the dunes are big, but it doesn't come close to the scale of Diamond Coast. And that in itself does add a lot to the experience of the Diamond Coast. Just that driving through the dunes, up the dunes, down the dunes is something we'll never forget. And then of course, this image on the right of me was taken by the lovely Laura. And again, the landscapes are completely untouched. There's no car tracks, there's no human or signs of human activities. There's just pure wildlife, pure nature. I think this image, we are, I can't remember, I want to say 15 or 20 kilometers away from the ocean.
Mhm.
It is so silent at night that we were able to hear the ocean. Well, that's what we concluded we were hearing, because we didn't know what else was coming from a western direction that sounded like the waves. But anyways, um, I don't want to say the one is better than the other, but me personally, simply because of the scale of the dunes, I would lean towards the Diamond Coast.
Yeah, I remember going up and down driving the Skeleton Coast, so I remember quite a few tall dunes, but I need to go and check the ones in Diamond to feel the difference.
Of course, the biggest difference is the Skeleton Coast was a self-drive, which was very fun because that allowed us to experience the driving, where on this trip, that's not the case. At no stage are we allowed to drive because, when you're on those dunes, you can't really... You can't expect people that don't exactly know what they're doing in the dunes to just go and drive for 5 minutes, because accidents can happen.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun in the Skeleton Coast, going up and down, and fantastic adventures. Carel, man, great job. You made me want to go back. I hope I can join you.
Well, you made a promise, either 26 or 27, so I'm going to have to see you there at some stage.
Yeah, I need to have a little Daniel grow a little bit older and then start traveling again. But I can't wait to go and visit. As you mentioned, Namibia is just magical. It's huge, and you cannot do it in one trip.
Not at all. Not at all. No, I think I mentioned that's why we do 3 different trips, so that we can tick off a lot of the beautiful locations in Namibia without having to feel rushed. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this trip, I really firmly believe that Namibia is top 3 best countries for photographers on earth, because of the fact that they have great landscapes, wildlife opportunities, astro opportunities, cultural opportunities, and so architectural opportunities like Kolmanskop. So it's not like, if you come back, if you have done the Diamond Coast and now you want to do the big loop or the Skeleton Coast trip, it's not one trip will ever be the same. Even if you do the same trip twice, it's not ever going to be the same, because the dunes constantly change. I mean, the people in the group, they do matter, and they also change, and the PhotoPills are always such a nice bunch of people. So I look forward to it next year. I believe it's in June.
I've been there 3 times, so I've done the big loop twice and the Diamond Coast, the Skeleton Coast North. Next is gonna be Diamond for sure.
Fingers crossed. Well, Rafa, thank you so much for having me. And
thank you for your explanations. Thank you everyone for bearing with us. We still have almost 50 people with us at this time. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with you, Carel. Thank you again. Any last words you want to say before we say goodbye?
I think I've mentioned everything. I want to emphasize again, if anybody has got any questions, if you are not already convinced on joining this trip, at least in the future, please reach out to me or to Rafa, and we would be more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carel. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Jess, for helping us in the chat. And as always, guys, if you like this video, give us a like, subscribe. I'll see you next Wednesday in another video. And remember that you have the power to imagine, plan, and shoot legendary photos. Bye and have fun. Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And Happy New Year's.
Bye-bye, guys.